my cats are growing older and louder. And this recording, the usual time that we finish this recording is half an hour after the usual time that they eat. So they may make an appearance later.
Excellent.
We will see. If you suddenly hear some frantic meowing in the background, it means they are hungry. I am recording on a new computer.
That was fast.
Isn't that exciting?
It is exciting, but that was fast. Like your previous computer, you only had that for
2 or 3 years.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought it was longer than that, shorter than that.
No, I've had it for a few years. But anyway, this is not an upgrade. This is an addition. This is a desktop computer.
Oh, okay.
So my previous computer remains my primary laptop computer. But for the last few years, I haven't had a desktop. And I splashed out over Christmas on an iMac Pro.
Oh, right.
Which is very fancy. So it's very exciting. It's I will leave the full review for the many, many other podcasts and people that have done it, but suffice to say, it's very nice.
Do you need all of that processing power, Dani?
No.
That's the beauty of this whole thing, isn't it?
No, but it is nice. I mean, my other computer is a MacBook Adorable, the little tiny one that is the first generation of those, and it's a great computer and actually suffices for most of my needs, but it's very much at the opposite end of the scale to the iMac Pro.
Yes.
And it's great, except when I want to play about with game stuff. I don't make games professionally anymore, but in my spare time, it's nice sometimes to play about with some graphic stuff.
Right.
Maybe try and write something on Shader Toy, or maybe play about in Unity a little bit, or, all those sorts of things. And they're all possible on the little MacBook, but they're just, it's not really what it's optimized towards.
Right.
So, I find myself not doing those things. And it is nice to be on a computer where the only limit is my own willingness to put the effort in. Like,
sure.
if I feel like playing about with Unity or even Unreal Engine, which is very heavy, then I can just do that without really giving it a second thought. The other day I was playing about with Renoise. I installed Renoise on it and was following the tutorials, and and I have yet to close an app since I bought it. It's got 64 gigabytes of RAM and 10 cores. So I've just opened apps and left them open and just am steadily increasing apps, and I still only used up half my RAM. So
excellent.
That's nice.
That's nice. Closing apps is such a hassle, really, isn't it?
Such a chore. Well, it's not the closing them. It's the, having to open them again.
Yeah. Right. Right.
Anyway, so I had to, this is the first time recording on this new computer, which meant I had to reinstall Call Recorded for FaceTime and all those sorts of things before we could get set up. Yes, so new computer, new year. And this is actually our first recording in the new year, because we did our New Year's episode, which went out a couple of weeks ago.
Right.
We recorded that before we hit the new year. And then a couple of weeks ago, when we would usually have been recording it, I was in Los Angeles for a conference. So that's why we couldn't record. And actually, a little bit of follow-up, but we talked during the last episode about trains and about the signs that you have in Japanese train stations.
Yeah.
The Chikanwa-kan, Chikanwa-hanzai, and all those. And we were talking about it as sort of a uniquely Japanese problem. And I think at one point during the recording, I said, it's a shame that you even need those signs, but you do.
Right.
Or something along those lines. Well, I noticed while I was in LA and I rode the metro there, they had those signs.
Really?
So they have them here as well. They had them, being California, they had them in both Spanish and English. And the Spanish one was No se tolerará, which is similar to the Japanese one. I think there's a series of posters in Japan, which is Zettai yurusanai. They have as another one that we didn't mention last time, but it means, it will not be tolerated. Those are the same. But the English version of this same poster, exactly the same design, just the copy was in English instead of Spanish. And the main catchphrase on that was, it's off limits, which I thought was rubbish. Because there's unless you read the small print, you didn't actually get a feeling for what was off limits. And it's almost shying away from trying to say the thing. I mean, I guess with the, it won't be tolerated. It's not saying what won't be tolerated either, but it just feels a bit stronger. So anyway, I had criticisms of the English copy, but still, this is obviously an issue here as well, and is being met with the same sort of posters. One sort of interesting thing is that the small print copy on the posters, in contrast to Japan, where I felt like the focus was on how you report the person who's done it.
Yeah.
On these posters, the focus was, as a victim, how you find support for yourself a little bit.
Interesting.
So I don't know, slight different skew. But anyway, that was a thing that I noticed. So it's not just a Japanese problem. This problem does exist here as well.
Right. Well, that's sad, but it's also interesting as well that the angle is very different.
Right. Yeah. And the other thing that my wife has a bone to pick with you.
Yep.
About your description of the New Year's meal, which we were talking about all the different ingredients and how there's a lot of different wordplay.
Yeah.
And that was all true. Many of the ingredients are similar in where our respective wives come from. But one thing that you didn't mention, I think we just moved on before we got around to it. But of course, the mochi that goes in the soup that you have on New Year's Day, that's sort of the whole point.
Right.
So I felt like we couldn't leave it without having mentioned that. But because the miso, it's white miso in some regions in Japan, it's a different miso in other regions. You know, all these things might be different, but the mochi is definitely going to be there, right?
Yeah. No, my description of the foods was lacking not only mochi, but there were a whole range of other things that I'd forgotten to mention when we talked about that. So yes, I'll take responsibility for forgetting to mention mochi. Probably the reason that it didn't come to mind is I actually don't like mochi.
What?
Yeah, so this is, I'm very proud of the fact that I'm a very appreciative, very non-fussy eater, and I will happily and gratefully eat pretty much anything. And I think that I try to raise my children in the same way because, everybody's different, but I really think that food is something that's very precious and that needs to be appreciated and taken very seriously and just not taken lightly. You know, it's not something for you to be too opinionated about. You enjoy and you appreciate all food. That's my own opinion. However, mochi is hard for me. So I think what it is that the texture of mochi, when you first put it into your mouth, it plays tricks. It seems to play tricks with my mind in that what my mouth is expecting to experience when I'm eating mochi is not what is actually happening. And the fact that you chew it, but you can't kind of, like chewing it often seems to have no effect. It's kind of like chewing gum that you kind of just, I basically, essentially, my mouth just doesn't understand how to properly eat it, and I end up either swallowing it too soon and then choking, or I end up sort of sitting there for like 5 minutes, kind of chewing on this kind of elastic ball of rice mass, not actually having it change in its consistency at all. And my mouth is just thinking, okay, I've been chewing on this for a long time. When can I swallow it? Because it's not, the consistency is not changing here. Am I doing the right thing?
We should probably mention for people who aren't familiar that mochi is pounded rice.
Yeah.
And it's pounded until it forms this sort of sticky, stretchy ball.
Yeah, so Japanese rice, as many people probably know, Japanese rice is a little bit different from other Asian rice in that the grain is a lot shorter and generally it absorbs a lot more water, which means that Japanese rice sticks together much more, which is the reason why you can make things like sushi, because the rice is stuck to itself. Whereas things like basmati rice or jasmine rice or these other like long grain rice, they tend to, after being cooked, they tend to be a little bit more dry, so you feel more like you're eating grains, whereas with Japanese rice, where it's much more sticky and wet, it's more like you're eating sort of chunks of rice. And that has lots of interesting properties, such as making sushi. And the other thing is that if you mash it, like with a hammer, enough, all of the rice, the kernel breaks down and it just sort of, everything sticks to itself and it becomes kind of like a dough.
Right.
But very, very... What's the right word? Not elastic. Is elastic the right word?
Elastic, well, no, because it doesn't bounce back. Gloopy, I mean.
Gloopy. Yeah. And
Stretchy.
basically what I was saying just a moment ago about eating it is that it does require it does require practice, because unlike most foods, the more you chew on it, it just sort of takes the chewing and just becomes more goopy. It doesn't actually disintegrate and doesn't actually break down like crunchy foods or, most other foods.
Do you like toffee?
Like caramel?
I think of toffee as being like caramel, but a bit harder, and it has that same property. It's similar to mochi in that it starts off harder than mochi does, but as you chew it, it becomes very chewy and sort of starts to stretch out and takes quite a lot of chewing before you can...
I don't know that we call it toffee in Australia. Well, there is toffee, obviously, but I know it as like hard caramel. And a hard caramel, you suck on it. And then if you try to chew it, it'll basically stick to your teeth for about an hour. Is that like toffee?
I guess so, but it's different from like a Werther's Original or something, which is hard, right? If you were to bite into it, it would crack.
Right.
A toffee wouldn't crack so much as just steadily become softer as you masticate.
Yeah, no, I mochi, anyway, after 16 years, I couldn't get used to it. And every year when New Year's would come around would be the one time that it's obligatory to eat mochi, and couldn't really get used to it. This is basically comes down to my mouth expecting to be able to disintegrate this thing, but it doesn't happen like that, so I don't actually know when to swallow it. And it's just like a physically uncomfortable feeling of constantly chewing but not knowing when it's okay to swallow. That's I think like several people die each year from...
I was about to say, I don't know what the statistics are, but yes, several people do die at New Year's each year when they have their mochi. Usually old people.
And foreigners like me.
I'm not sure if there are any foreigners. There've probably been some, but... Well, don't let, dear listener, Alex's description put you off, because mochi is one of the most delicious foods in existence. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, even if that opinion is wrong.
Yeah, I mean, delicious. I mean, it's basically rice, so...
It is. I mean, you have it in stuff though, right? And it's lovely. It just mochi, fresh mochi. Maybe I should find a video or something of them doing the mashing up, because you have this big sort of stone bowl, and you have one person who's folding it back on itself and the other person who's hitting it with a hammer.
That I've done several times.
And then you sort of make it, and when it's freshly made, you just dip it in a bit of kinako, which is like a sweet, it's not sugar, but it's almost like a sugary sort of sweet powder that you dip it in, and then just eat it like that. It's delicious.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Mashing the mochi is something that I've done several times, but usually I get out of having to eat it by just saying, no, I'll take another turn at mashing. It's okay. Right. You eat first. I'll keep mashing over here.
Now, do you have on your soup that you have on New Year's Day, do you have this little sprinkled dark seaweed? I can't remember what the name of it is, but there's a specific kind of seaweed that we have, that where my wife is from, they have it. But it seems to be very local to them, because when we were in Kobe or Kyoto, even Kobe, which is close, we would not be able to find this in the supermarkets. So it doesn't seem to be a very common thing, but there's a specific kind of seaweed that you sometimes have in it. So do you not have it with seaweed?
So you're not talking about nori, are you?
I'm not talking about not nori as in the flat, hard one.
It's kind of stringy with a kind of white powder on it. Is that the one?
I don't think there's...
It sort of looks like it's got a little dusty white powder on it, and it's actually hard. And when you put it into the soup, it softens slightly?
No.
Okay.
This is more of the seaweed itself forms like a powder.
Okay.
And you just have a little bit sprinkled on top. We do have nori as well, but no, so that is just a super local thing. And do you have katsuobushi? Katsuobushi, which is the fish flakes that you have on top of okonomiyaki and things like that.
Katsuobushi, yes.
Yeah. You have that in it.
Yeah.
I think that's a Kansai thing, but I'm not sure. Anyway, very interesting. There's lots of... If anyone else has been living in other areas of Japan and wants to comment on the Reddit with their local recipes, then I'd be interested to hear, because I don't know anything outside of Kansai, really.
Yeah, to be honest, it's been a few years since we've been able to actually do that, just because we have a 3-year-old, well, 3-year-old now, but a 2-year-old last year and a 1-year-old the year before that. So
right.
The New Year big feast cooking on the 31st is logistically a little complicated at this moment. So that's probably another reason why my memory was not so good when I was trying to recall the different things that my wife used to make, because it's been several years since we've actually done that. So
Right.
that's my excuse anyway. And mochi.
Right.
So another thing that's happened for me over the past few weeks since we spoke last is I have found myself a band.
Oh, have you? Oh, very good.
It's a rather interesting and unusual band to be involved with, and it's a real privilege. Basically, a friend of my son's, his father, I met him at a school function, where like an open day for the school, and just started talking to a random nice-looking father standing in the corner holding a paper cup full of coffee. And turns out that he was a musician, not professionally, but as a side thing, he's a musician, and he plays guitar and a whole bunch of other instruments. And he said the current project that he's working on is he plays in the backing band of a 200-voice pop choir.
Whoa.
So like 200 people singing basically mostly gospel arrangements of pop music. And this backing band happened to need a bass player. So he said, come over to my house and let's just have a quick session. Basically, it was kind of like an audition. And so I took my bass and I went, and it seems that I'm in.
Oh, cool.
So it's a pretty amazing amazing privilege. Now, one thing that I was looking forward to telling you about, and also talking about. To begin with, the first impression of playing with this not really professional, I suppose amateur guitarist is, wow, Swedish people take their music very seriously and they do not mess around. And I mean that not in the sense of being too concerned with details or anything like that, but this guy was extremely good. And it got me thinking. It was interesting that, here's a guy who's been playing guitar for about 20, 25 years. And previously, when I was in Japan playing in different bands, I'd played with musicians there who had also, been playing their instruments for a little more than 2 decades. And it was really fascinating experiencing the difference, because one thing I noticed is that here, technically, some of the players may not be on par with their peers in Japan. However, there's this undeniable feel and this undeniable relaxed confidence in the flow of the music and the rhythm and the emotion and the expression, which is something that was very, very new to me after having played, 16 years in about 4 or 5 bands in Japan. Because in Japan, what I found was that the musicians there were extremely concerned with technical proficiency and with technical accuracy. However, sometimes, a little bit clinical on the side of expression, or basically the artistic side of capturing the mood. Yeah, sometimes, obviously it's a broad generalization, and I was lucky to play with many musicians in Japan who had a wonderful balance between technique and the artistic side of things. But just in general, I found that in Japan they were very pro-technique. And I can't talk in general at all yet in Sweden because I've only experienced this one band so far, but I was just floored at how good this guitarist was, despite not technically being, the best guitarist out there.
Right.
Just this confidence and this I guess the best term for it in modern English would be swagger. Just like this confidence in his ability to express certain emotions on demand, and a relaxed, laid back riding along with the song's emotion and the song's tempo. Because one thing that you often get with people who are highly technically proficient but are less experienced with the emotional aspect of music is that they will rush, meaning when the music builds up, they get faster.
Right.
And that's a natural thing because, your body starts to feel tense, or you could be sort of anxious about, for example, if you're a drummer, you'll play a pattern, and in between the changes between the patterns, you'll have a fill. Well, in other parts of a band as well, especially if you're in an accompanying role, and for bassists as well, you'll have a part, and then when there's a gap, which is appropriate depending on what the vocal is doing, you may put in a fill.
Right.
And a very common thing that I'd found in Japan at around a certain skill level was people would rush in those parts, and myself too. Just is kind of like this building up of this tension, and that comes out as your technique kind of losing the grip for a little bit and just sort of slipping a little faster ahead of the beat for a moment.
Right.
And there was absolutely none of that. And it was like it was probably the most comfortable and relaxed I have felt as a bass player playing along with somebody else in a long time. And it was a really interesting, moving experience and I'll keep you updated on this because I have a feeling it's going to be a progressive journey and a progressive discovery for myself, having played for more than 10, 15 years with musicians who are highly focused on technique, coming now to musicians who are not unfocused, not focused on technique. That is, their technique comes simply from the years that they've been playing and the practice that they've gotten. But it's less about, to use another modern English musician's term, less about woodshedding.
I'm not familiar with that one.
The idea is that you do your technique practice in a wooden shed.
Right.
So you sort of sit there for several hours playing the same scale to a metronome, wood shedding is a term that's sometimes used on online forums to talk about basically honing your chops.
Right.
So anyway, the focus is less on wood shedding and less on these kinds of repetitive mastery of certain techniques, and more on just the expression and the vibe and the atmosphere and the artistic objective of the song. So, yeah, it was really, really an eye-opening experience. And so the next step for this band is that I will go along to play with the choir. We're going to try out with the choir next, which is in 2 weeks.
Oh, cool.
I have 2 songs to learn for that. I will be learning Freedom by George Michael, which was the song that I tried out with this guitarist, which is a very, very, interestingly enough, very technically demanding song, especially for the guitarist and for the bass player. And yet, this guy, it was just a breeze playing this with him. And the other song is Space Oddity by David Bowie, of course.
Oh, it sounds exciting. So how did this go? Did you just go and jam? Did he have sheet music for you, or were you just playing by ear, or what? Were you just
he basically
improvising? What?
He said one of the songs that we're doing in the choir is Freedom by George Michael. So why don't you learn that and then come over and we'll play together first.
Oh, okay. So he gave you did he just gave you the song ahead of time and you went and learned it however you wanted by listening or by looking at the music or whatever you wanted to do.
Yeah, exactly. So in this specific case, in the case of this song by George Michael, it's a 90s pop song, and the bass is a synth bass, which has been programmed into a sequencer. So it follows a pattern. Right. And it's a very rhythmically complicated pattern. And so this particular song doesn't give too much room for improvisation. You're following the pattern, which locks into certain openings in the drum part, the piano part, and the guitar part. So there's not too much room for embellishment. The other song, which I'll be learning now for the next practice, Space Oddity, is amazing. The bass part is really, really articulate and very subtle and very nicely complementary of the fantastic lyrics and fantastic performance by Bowie himself. And that is also another song that doesn't really leave too much space for too much improvisation. You are either doing something completely different or you are doing the original line in all of its glory. So I will probably choose the latter in this case, just to keep it more faithful. And of course, if you've got 200 people singing on top of you, it doesn't really matter. So anyway, I'll keep you posted on how this goes because I have a feeling it's going to be an interesting journey of discovery for me too. Yeah, sounds exciting. Do they put things up on YouTube and things like that, or SoundCloud, or? This is a project, so it actually is working towards a public performance in May. And after the May performance, obviously there'll be probably plans for future performances. Right. So hopefully, with 200 people, hopefully somebody's going to remember to get something out and record it. Right. Yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah. I mean, it's impressive. They're planning on doing something in May and they're still searching for a bassist at the end of January. Yeah. Well, the backing band is at the moment just the guitarist and a pianist, and they've been looking for they have a candidate for the drums, and now, all being well, they've found a bass player, hopefully.
Oh, cool.
If the rest of the band likes me too. So, yeah.
Are you going to meet all 200 of them?
I guess I will. I guess so as my first foray into the music performance in Sweden, I have to say I'm quite moved, and let's hope it wasn't just this one particular guitarist who happened to be very good.
Well, at the very least, you're going to be meeting, 202, the pianist and the guitarist, musical people in Sweden. So even once this project is over, you'll then have a lot more contacts. You'll have a better starting point for discovering other musical projects, I imagine.
Yeah, let's hope so. One thing I wanted to ask you about, one thing I've noticed, obviously, I've been here in Stockholm for several months now, and it's all very new to me. One thing that my wife and I have noticed is that singing seems to take place in Swedish culture. It takes a place that is very different to what I've experienced before in Australia and certainly in Japan. Singing here seems to be much more commonplace, and you see it at, for example, my son's school, and you see it at my daughter's kindergarten, and all of the preschool events and stuff. The preschool events will always have two of the staff who are music performers with a piano or a guitar, and they'll be singing songs in every session. And you always see all the parents there together singing as well, singing these well-known children's songs. Now, what I wanted to ask you is, in your experience growing up in the countries that you've grown up in, and including Japan as well, in my experience, I found that singing is the one form of musical performance that people were the most reluctant with. And in Australia, when I grew up, even karaoke was never really that popular, because that's obviously singing and you need to be really, really drunk to actually enjoy it. That was kind of the general understanding about karaoke. It's for getting drunk to. So we all know about the wonderful physical effects and the medical benefits of singing, and how it really can bring a sense of joy. And then, ironically, at least in Australia, from what I remember, singing is the one that people are the most reluctant with and the least enthusiastic about. Yeah. So that's the opposite here, is my point.
I think, I think that's very true in the UK. I feel like there is a definite Anglo-Saxon reluctance to sing in public that exists in the UK and America and Australia as well. I wouldn't have said that I felt that in Japan. I actually noticed it. I not perhaps to the same extent that you're noticing it in Sweden, but I felt in Japan sometimes that singing was much more embedded into the culture. Karaoke is a thing that people just do normally. And I think because it is a sort of social thing that most people do for fun and not to get drunk in, I do think there is a generally higher level that people have become comfortable singing in front of each other, and so they've done it more, and so they've got better. So I feel like your average Japanese person ends up being a better at singing along with pop songs, even if they're not like super amazing singers, but just like humming a tune or singing along with a pop song or whatever. Are better at it than your average English person, certainly better than me. But I felt like that in Japan. So, interesting. Sweden obviously takes that even further, but it feels like a very sort of Anglosphere thing, this reluctance to sing. I can't really remember when I was in Spain, I was very young, and I don't really remember how much it was all involved with then, but you have an image of sort of Mediterranean countries, and Italy in particular. You sort of imagine everyone singing all the time. I don't know if there's any truth to that. So I very much have it in my head as an Anglo-Saxon or an English-speaking thing.
It's I wouldn't say that's the case in Ireland, though.
Good point. Yeah, very, very true. There's definitely a singing culture in Ireland,
potentially also,
and in Wales.
Yeah, Wales and Scotland, perhaps.
Strong
as well,
singing culture
maybe.
In Wales. I don't really know about Scotland.
Yeah,
I couldn't say either way.
Because I can remember one time at the Adelaide Festival is like a a major arts event that comes to Adelaide. Is it annually or maybe every 4 years or every 2 years? I forget now. Anyway, there was a special performance by a very famous Irish folk group. And one of the things that I can remember, my father and I went to see it, and one of the things that really riveted my father and I is the ease with which, I mean, these guys are professional performers, so obviously they're going to be singing, it's their job. But
Right.
as a musical performance with voice, you tend to expect that, it's like a band. You've got a backing band or an accompanist, and you've got the person singing there with a microphone or whatever. It's something that you come to expect. However, in this case, the musicians were all on stage, and many of the songs in the performance would be just one person standing up, coming to the front of the stage, no microphone or anything, and just standing there singing by himself. Just like straight out into the audience, just this one person's voice. And that I can remember as being extremely moving, because as a group of, or as a culture, at least to my understanding, that was rather reluctant about the idea of singing, to have somebody who clearly had no reservations at all about basically bearing his voice and standing in front of a whole crowd of people and just singing by himself was very, very moving. Now that I'm here in Sweden, where people, it seems to be a similar lack of reluctance when it comes to singing, and people just seem to openly do it. It makes more sense to me now, but it reminded me of the singing culture and the folk music culture in Ireland, which clearly doesn't have the reluctance that other countries do with singing.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I'd be interested to hear from our international listeners, because I know we've got some from various European countries, and obviously our Thai listener as well. Quite a variety of different cultures there, and I'd be very interested to hear how that changes over, in the different countries, and how they, how much of a role singing takes in the culture, how much it is kind of an everyday thing, because you're right, it definitely seems to be sort of hidden away in English and Australian culture. It has its place, right? I mean, if you're in a band, you might sing at a gig, or if you are in a concert setting or something like that. But the idea of just communal singing as a thing that people do together is not very much of a thing, except, of course, for church.
Right.
And, at my school, we had chapel every morning, and so we had to sing hymns every morning, and people who go to church regularly, same sort of thing. But I couldn't really describe English church singing as singing so much as a sort of tired drone. I think Eddie Izzard did a bit on national anthems, and how you've got all these sort of people singing about the strength of the nation and things they believe in the English national anthem, which is God Save the Queen, who, one, is probably one of the most saved people on the planet, and two, the way people are singing it, like, God save our gracious Queen. I mean, that's just... You do not sound like you want her saved.
I mean, that's only because people only know the first 4 words, right? Yeah, it is interesting. America plays an interesting part in this whole discussion, so I'm actually really looking forward to hearing from our numerous American friends of the show on our Reddit about singing in their upbringing as well, because especially rural America, and obviously in the south parts of America as well, I guess it's a stereotyped image perhaps, but singing in those parts seems to be something that comes very easily to people. As for metropolitan America, or the big cities, and that I'd be interested to hear what people have to say about that. But yeah, it is interesting.
You got a lot of people singing along with the music that's in their headphones here, which is new to me. It's not so much a communal thing as a very, very private thing that is somehow being made public.
Right.
Because you can't hear the music they're singing along to, but they are singing along to it with gusto as they walk down the street. So that seems to be quite a common thing here.
Yeah, interesting. Do you sing?
Well, not really. I'm quite bad at it, unfortunately. And I've tried many times to sort of improve, but it's one of those things that I've never really tried hard enough. I like do it for a bit and then I get sidetracked.
Right.
But I sing to myself. I mean, I play guitar and I sing along, but I don't really do that publicly.
Yeah.
And I used to do it when my wife was in, but she asked me to stop. So it's just me on my own now.
Yeah.
I do enjoy karaoke. You know, I break out the Tom Waits. But everyone leaves. It's a good way to clear out if you're in a shared sort of karaoke space and you want it to yourself.
Right.
So,
yeah, I have a
good technique.
I have a bit of a problem in that my main instrument is obviously bass guitar. If there's anybody else listening who's a bassist, please tell me this. How adept are you at singing or even talking while you play bass guitar? Because some people can do it extremely well. For example, Sting. Sting was the bass player for the Police, but he's obviously the vocalist too, and he has absolutely no difficulty in separating his fingers from his voice. However, for me, I have a serious physical handicap and I just cannot do it. I can't even talk while I'm playing bass.
Yeah, I think we did talk about this once before, actually, when we were talking about the difficulty of drumming while you're singing and
that's
playing
right.
bass.
Yeah, we did talk
Bonus follow-up question: can you eat mochi while playing bass? That is the.
Yes, probably.
Obviously, you can't because you can't eat it when you're not playing bass.
Maybe I could actually, because there's no decision about swallowing. You just have to keep on moving your jaw, basically.
Right.
So
in rhythm.
In rhythm, yeah. Maybe I could do. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, very good.
Anyway, I'll keep you posted on the my band adventures. Should be interesting. This is an interesting way to start off my experience in Sweden.
Yeah. No, I'll be interested to hear. Did you hear about DuckDuckGo? We spoke about in a previous episode. As the search engine that I'm using, and they've literally just, I think today or yesterday, announced a new sort of plugin / app that they're releasing.
Okay.
Have you heard anything about that?
No, please tell me, because actually I've started to use DuckDuckGo as my default search engine.
Have you?
On my
How are you finding it?
On my phone.
On your phone,
yeah.
Okay. And how is that going?
It's great. To be honest, I don't search for things on the internet that much on my phone because I'm mostly using apps. So the chances to actually search for something are not that frequent for me on my phone, less so than my computer. But yeah, so far I love the theming capability. I'm embarrassed to say that because it's like nothing to do with the actual quality of the search engine or the privacy or anything like that. But I like the one that looks like a terminal screen with the green text on the black background.
I am not surprised. I played about with all the themes and then I went back to the default one.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, well, cool. Yeah, see how it goes. I mean, I find stuff. Actually, somebody was saying the other day, somebody was tweeting about this, but interestingly, Google seems to do a better job at all the sort of data mining and the machine learning and whatever stuff that they do to find the thing that you're looking for, right? They have an almost uncanny ability to see through the words that you actually type in the search box, get to the bottom of the thing you're actually looking for, and then find that, which is their major sort of selling point. DuckDuckGo can't really compete on that level, but they are arguing that they value your privacy more, and so you choose your priorities. But another interesting thing about DuckDuckGo that I didn't realize is they seem to hold a longer cache or an older cache. So there was somebody who was saying that they were doing very precise searches where on both Google and DuckDuckGo, you can actually search within a website. Did you know this? You can say like site : and the address of the website.
Yes.
And it will restrict the search to be within that website. So if you're looking for something you found on a particular website once, you can do that.
Yeah, I use that frequently with discussion forums. It's very useful.
Right. So this person was saying they sometimes search for stuff on their own website because they're just looking for a post they made like 4 years ago and they want to dig it up. And they said that they would find that Google sometimes would no longer have this post in its cache because it was too old.
Oh, interesting.
And DuckDuckGo would. So whereas Google performed better as a general purpose search engine for finding anything and figuring out what it is you're actually looking for and all the rest of it.
Right.
DuckDuckGo was actually very good for this very narrow purpose of like searching for a specific string of text within a website. So that was a sort of interesting. I didn't realize that there was any area in which they could actually beat Google on the quality of the search engine portion of it. So that was quite interesting. But they have today I think, or at least very recently, announced a new, I think it's an app on mobile platforms and then a plugin for the various browsers if you're on a PC or a Mac. And it is trying to bring together a lot of different privacy controls. So DuckDuckGo has always been, the search engine that values privacy, and it doesn't track you while you're searching, but it doesn't help you. The moment you click on the link that you found, it no longer helps you, right?
Right.
So what they're saying now is, they want to try and just help you a bit more. Once you've searched for something in DuckDuckGo, you click on the site, and then what can they do to prevent that site from tracking you? So they have this plugin, and it disables various sort of well-known JavaScript tracking software or it works similarly to an ad blocker. I'm not sure. It's just been announced, so I haven't had a chance to properly evaluate it, but I don't know if it acts as a full ad blocker or if it's something you would want sort of as well as an ad blocker. It gives each site a rating based on whether the site is served over HTTP or HTTPS.
Right.
So whether it's an encrypted connection, whether it has tracking JavaScript and things like that on it, and if so, how much. And also they've hooked up with TOSDR. Do you know about TOSDR?
Too long didn't read? No.
TLDR is too long didn't read. TOSDR is a play on that, which is terms of service didn't read.
Oh, okay.
And it's a website. It's a very good website. Basically they go through the terms of service for various well-known sites like Facebook and Google and everything, and they read through all the legalese and summarize it, so you can get a feel for the contents of the terms of service without having to wade through like 30 pages of legal text.
Interesting.
So it's quite a good site in general, but they've hooked up with this DuckDuckGo plugin so that while you're on the site, as part of this rating, you can see how they scored on the terms of service didn't read website.
Okay.
Whether they're considered to have, terms of service that guard your privacy or that impinge on your privacy or, anywhere in between. There's obviously, this is a very manual process. This is actual humans reading the legal text and rating it. So it's not automated. So it's limited in terms of the websites that are actually featured on it. For example, one of the sites that I just installed the thing and looked on a couple of sites, and Fastmail hasn't been analyzed. So Fastmail just has no score on this thing.
Right.
But other large sites like Reddit or Facebook or something like that, they have been analyzed and they do have a sort of score. So, and then sometimes it will give you the upgraded score. So it's like this site would usually score a C. It's like a grade, right? A, B, C. This site would usually score a C, but we disabled the tracking software, so we've upgraded it to a B for you.
Okay.
Which is sort of an interesting thing. But I don't know. I haven't had a proper go with it yet. Everyone has to decide for themselves how much they trust browser plugins. Like, it's an interesting catch-22. Do you trust the people making the plugin more than the people writing the JavaScript that the plugin purports to block?
Right.
So that's a personal decision. I know that Safari does actually have some tracking prevention features within it. So even without installing this plugin, you can actually get some of the benefits of preventing tracking software from working just using vanilla Safari. It's in the preferences. I don't know about Chrome or Firefox because I don't use them. But so I'm not sure that this DuckDuckGo thing is buying me much because I'm on Safari. I've just installed it to sort of evaluate it. But I do quite like this rating thing. Like, that's a nice touch that even if it's not adding anything, I don't know to what extent, whether it blocks more trackers or not. But even if it has no value other than to tell me what trackers were on there that it's blocked, that's interesting information. So it was quite an interesting little thing. So I'll put a link in the show notes.
Yeah, following DuckDuckGo's slow, gradual development and increase exposure as more people become aware of it has been very interesting. It's a curious, obviously it's an extremely, extremely difficult field to break into, and you need to be, the field of search engines, and you need to be doing something pretty amazing in order to get any traction against the big G. And we've seen many other search engines come and go trying to keep up with the big G, but it's nigh impossible these days. But it's interesting that DuckDuckGo is coming at it from a completely different angle and seemingly doing quite well at it.
Yeah, I mean, it does seem to have been sort of getting a bit of mind share in recent years. So this DuckDuckGo thing now obviously is sort of, I don't know if it acts as an ad blocker, but it's sort of starting to move into that area. Do you have an opinion on ad blockers? Do you use an ad blocker or anything like that?
I do use an ad blocker, but not necessarily out of choice. We may have talked about browsers before, but for some strange reason, I think I've said this exact phrase before when we talked about it last time, but I'll say it again. I'm using Opera.
Right.
And I don't know why. I started using it we talked about it before, so I won't bother.
Yeah, we did talk about that. And I think you did say that Opera was one of the first browsers to have ad blockers or something like that.
Yeah, and so it still does. It has an ad blocker that's on by default, and you get a little thing up in the top that shows you how many ads on this site have been blocked. And they do it for speed reasons, I guess, primarily, more so than, trying to declutter your internet experience. Obviously, sites can load marginally faster if they're not loading all of this ad data and sending...
Not marginally faster. They can load dramatically faster.
Okay.
It's the ad software and the amount of JavaScript that gets downloaded for ads these days is often many times larger than the content of the page that you actually want to load. That's kind of one of the problems that has led to this standoff.
Right.
We have a kind of situation at the moment where there's a bit of an arms race going on, where now all the major browsers support ad blockers. And even on mobile devices, you can install an ad blocker for Safari, for example. And so there's much more software support for blocking ads. And in response to that, obviously, a lot of websites that make their money off ads
are
saying, well, hang on, how do we get paid?
Yeah.
And so there's a bit of a debate going on there, and it's quite interesting. I feel like the ad industry has sort of made this problem for themselves, because this amount of JavaScript that gets downloaded, the amount of tracking that gets done, not only is it problematic from a privacy standpoint, but you also making the browsing experience just much slower and much worse. I mean, I these days regularly read websites which are like news articles, which have an advert that says, so they've got the text of the news, and then they've got a square sort of advert, and it says the article continues following the advert.
Right.
And you scroll down, and the article does continue, but like somehow the first couple of lines of the next paragraph have got hidden behind the advert, and there's no way that I can tell to sort of move the advert out the way or be able to. I have to sort of select the text and select upwards and copy it into like a text if I want to read it.
Right.
So it's like just really bad quality. I think there are sites which do, like if you look at Daring Fireball, for example, obviously John Gruber, who runs that site, has very strong opinions about ads himself, and so he puts effort into making his adverts not too intrusive, both from a design point of view and from a JavaScript privacy point of view. But there are sites which are showing a way that it can be done,
right,
without being a problem. But the vast majority of the industry has no concern for the user, and this sort of ad blocking is a response to that. And yet, as far as I can tell, nobody has recognized that. Like the ad industry's response to the rise of ad blockers is to start introducing anti-ad blockers that block access to the site if you have an ad blocker running.
Yeah, or notifications. I get that a lot because Opera has the ad blocker on by default, and I've never bothered to turn it off. You go to some websites where the first thing you'll see is this splash page that says, ads are important for how we generate revenue to run this site. So if you enjoy this site, please consider turning your ad blocker off. And Opera makes that very easy. You can do it just with a click or two and just kind of whitelist a certain website so that the ad blocker is off whenever you go there. But as you said, it definitely, you can definitely feel that we're in a pretty critical point of flux at the moment with internet and internet revenue. I was actually, this is ironic that you bring it up, because I was thinking about this the other day, that it's interesting how television entertainment, radio entertainment, maybe not so much magazines, but television and radio at least, have always traditionally been run on this whole idea of marketing being the key source of revenue. So that the idea that you would think that you've got all of these millions of people tuning in to watch this television program at this time on this television channel. So if you open this up so that you give businesses the opportunity to have their brand put there, the businesses are basically taking a gamble that out of 1 million people looking at this advertisement that they have there playing at this very popular television program, a certain percentage of those people are going to be inspired to go out and purchase a product, or at least they're going to have the product put in the back of their mind so that when they're at the shop looking at the options, they think, oh, there's that one that I saw on that ad the other night. So that's obviously for television, of course, for radio as well. And, we talked about before about radio, and, I'm listening to a lot more radio these days. And obviously when we have radio programs and they have advertisements in between the music, my kids say, oh, I hate the advertisements because that I want to listen to music. Why do I have to listen to somebody talking about car insurance or something?
Right.
And, I had to explain to them, yes, well, it is annoying having a gap in the music so that we have to listen to this thing that isn't really necessarily relevant to us. However, we have to remember that this is actually free, and there are people who are, running this whole operation for us, and we're able to tune into it for free. And I guess the opportunity for these people to have a way, obviously they need to be paid for the time and their experience and the know-how in order to put this kind of thing together, and this is just the way that it works. But anyway, explaining that to my children got me thinking that television, radio, that whole advertising paradigm for generating revenue from media, it's, I guess, do you think that the internet followed suit because it was developing at a speed perhaps when people just didn't have an opportunity to properly think about another way to do things? So that was kind of like, well, here's a website, how do we get some money out of it? Okay, well, it's very popular, so how about, we open it up and have this space available to people to put their advertisement, just like this was a TV program, or it was a free magazine, or it was a radio channel. Like, why do you think that the internet has come to rely on advertising as its main source of revenue?
Well, firstly, let me just put out there that I have no problem with advertising per se. The problem on the internet, which does not exist on radio and television, is the tracking and the fact that adverts can run essentially unrestricted software. Like, you have no idea. I mean, just because it's JavaScript, you don't think of it as like a proper program, right? But JavaScript can do a lot, and you wouldn't just let some random site install an executable on your computer and execute it. That would sound like madness, right? Now, admittedly, JavaScript is sandboxed within the context of usually one tab in your browser. Spectre, mumble, the world is on fire. But forget about that. Yes, it is a little bit more limited, but it can still use the resources on your computer. It can still use a ton of your computer's RAM, fill up your CPU, do Bitcoin mining and send the results back to the host. There's a lot that it can do without breaking outside of the confines of that sandbox. So it seems mad that you would just let them run arbitrary code. Of course, unlike television and radio, it's possible to do that. And so it's sort of inevitable that they would have tried to do that. Right. I think if television advertisers had the ability to see exactly how long people's eyeballs spent looking at that particular advert and exactly how effective it was,
Right.
they would have done that as well. It just wasn't, there was no physical way to do it, right?
Right.
So that is the problem with advertising on the internet. It's not the fact that there is advertising. It is that the advertising is too invasive and takes the form of running software that you have had no opportunity to make any decisions about whether you actually want it to run or not.
Right.
And it's still, today, it's very all or nothing. Like, you can turn off all JavaScript and break half the internet. Or you can leave JavaScript turned on and not have any opportunity to choose which particular bits of JavaScript you actually want to run. Ad blockers aside.
Do you think that ad blockers and the increasing awareness of tracking and ads and the increasing quantity of different kinds of ad blocker options, and even to the extent that you have browsers like Opera coming out in its default state with an ad blocker switched on, do you think that this is a good thing? Because it kind of, if you look at the sector of the internet that is powered by advertising revenue, you've now got the chief tool that people use to access that information actually preventing that generation of revenue.
Right. And there are definitely sites that are suffering from this.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that this is a bad thing, or that this kind of increase in popularity of ad blockers?
I think that the rise of ad blockers and anti-tracking software in browsers is a fundamentally necessary thing, but it is causing problems in the short term. And I don't know how those problems will get resolved in the long term, because everyone wants everything for free,
right?
Including me. Like, I go to the Economist website and more often than not get a banner up saying, you've already used up your free articles for this month.
Right.
So you have to subscribe if you want to read more. And I don't. There's enough content on the internet that I could not read that Economist article and keep scrolling up Twitter and another article will appear before me.
Right.
So I'm not really wanting for crap to read on the internet. Maybe that's part of the problem for these content producers. So I'm definitely guilty of this. And I would like for people who create content to be able to make a living doing that, so that they can go on creating good content, because the end result of everything just becoming fundamentally cheaper is that the quality of everything reduces.
Right.
Right? Like, if it turns out that, well, suddenly they can only make a third of what they ever used to make from adverts, but nobody's willing to pay subscriptions to make up the difference. So suddenly they're just making a third of the money they ever made. Well, there's no magic way that they're going to be able to continue making the same amount of content to the same quality, right? Something's got to give.
Right.
And I don't want that to be the case. So, in my idealistic universe, we would find some solution whereby, I can't think of a better idea than adverts. So let's say there are adverts, but that those adverts are somehow respectful, that we have, and I don't know how this would work, but rather than whitelisting specific websites, like you mentioned in the ad blockers, we might whitelist certain ad networks. We might start to define standards to which we hold the groups that distribute these adverts. And then, you can choose, well, am I going to allow adverts from Google AdSense, or am I going to only allow adverts from this sort of boutique advertiser that I know respects my privacy, or whatever? Maybe that could work. But at the same time, well, but then who wouldn't just turn them all off? Like, given that you've got the power to have an experience of the internet without any adverts bothering you, like, you have to be unusually conscientious and aware of the problems facing these websites and journalistic entities in order to go out of your way to sit down and go through the advert and say, okay, yeah, I want these ones, but I don't want these ones.
Right.
Like, so I'm not sure that's really a workable solution either.
I have an idea, and this is probably being done already, so, this is not amazing revolutionary solution to everything.
Right.
But before I give you the idea, I just want to ask a question.
Okay.
That is, how reluctant are you to pay for mobile apps?
Less reluctant than most, I think.
Right.
I do like to pay money to support apps.
Right. So my question is, what is different about supporting an app developer by a purchase of their app compared to, for example, if The Economist or any such kind of blog site with interesting articles, if they started to sell their articles on a per article basis, so you can pay a small amount of money, like $1, and then you'll get eternal access, infinite access to this one interesting article.
Right.
If that was the situation, would you be just as reluctant to support the website, however, still eager where you can to support an app developer?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'd like to think yes.
Yeah.
I have a suspicion in practice, no. At least it's easier. And this depends on your priorities and your interests and so forth. But it's very easy for me to decide not to read an article on the internet. I mean, that said, no, there are times that people link a thing and I think I'd like to read that. And then it offers me a subscription. And I'm like, well, I'm not. I don't want to read it enough to want to subscribe.
Right.
But I would chuck $1 at reading this one episode. But I don't know. That feels like it would add up quickly. And the other problem with it is that it encourages a certain kind of article. Traditional journalism runs on the basis that you subscribe to the whole thing, and they have quite sensational articles.
Right.
Or articles that are obviously huge news that they're going to cover, that everyone's going to be interested in. And people sort of subscribe mostly for those, but they fund the smaller, much narrower articles. So everyone pays for the whole package. And by doing that, these large articles that pull people in sort of subsidize these small local articles. And if you're working on a per article basis, especially if it worked on the other side as well, that the people wrote the articles that lots of people paid $1 for, got more money than the people who wrote the articles that only a very few people paid $1 for. I think you start to get into trouble because it discourages a certain kind of article.
Yeah, the idea that I was thinking to propose didn't involve the idea. It wasn't actually, pay per article, because obviously that's limited to a certain kind of website. You obviously need to have articles in order to.
Right.
But what I was wondering is, I'm the same as you, and that is that mobile apps, I feel far less inhibition when it comes to purchasing. Maybe it's because I was previously in the business of making mobile apps,
Right.
and therefore I know it's kind of like knowing the people on the other side of the curtain, and therefore you want to feel like you're supporting people like myself several years ago.
That's definitely a part of it.
But the other thing that I was wondering is that, with something like Apple's App Store, it's incredibly convenient, and if you find an app that you like, it's several clicks away, and you've made a purchase, and then every month you'll get this itemized list with a total amount of money and the different things that you've purchased, and it's all very easy and convenient. And I do like having this list of the things, like a receipt, where you've paid this much for this app, this much for this app, and then a total for this month.
Right.
Whereas if you think about the internet at large, when you've got different websites where there are different kinds of models, subscription model here, or for example, a pay for article there, and a subscription model, even if you were the kind of person that, subscribed to newspapers, subscribed to magazines, and you're very comfortable with the idea of subscription, and perhaps you used to work in a publication or something, so you understand the importance of subscriptions and regular revenue through that. Even if you were very open to subscription, therefore, you would still require you to, for example, okay, I want to make a subscription to The Economist So I've got to sign up for an account, got to pick a password, got to write in my email address,
Right.
got to switch off the receive newsletter button, and then got to fill out my profile. Then there's privacy controls, and then there's a billing section, and then there's the enter your credit card, and then there's a whole lot of steps. And then once you've done that,
and if you ever unsubscribe, they will not let you forget it.
Yeah.
Like you're signing yourself up to a lifetime of email when you subscribe to anything.
And then, of course, once you've done that, that's just one website. But let's say you want to read The Guardian, and you want to read the Financial Times, and you want to read The Economist, and you want to read various ones, and they're all different subscriptions with their different accounts and different passwords and different credentials and different terms of service and all of this kind of stuff. That's why I was thinking, I wonder if one solution, it's an impossible solution because you would never find a way it'd be impossible to do this with all these different companies cooperating. But if internet subscription, maybe not subscription, but internet payments in general was something that could be done with the convenience of like the App Store. So you're not looking at your credit card statement mixed in with your shopping and your, all of the other stuff for your lifestyle. You're just looking at a single list of the things that you have bought on the internet.
Yeah.
It's sounding more and more naive the more that I go on, but my point is that the convenience of the App Store, I wonder if that has had any effect on people like us. Perhaps are not a good example, but the general relative ease that people have with buying apps compared to paying for things on the internet. I wonder if the convenience of app stores in general could have something to do with that.
I mean, yes, there are ways that can help. I think it is possible to subscribe to many publications, including The Economist, and also The Washington Post and some others, through either the Apple News app or as an in-app purchase in the app for that publication. And so that means you don't need a whole account, and you can do it all from the same account that you use to buy apps with. I think it also means that you only get access to them from
your phone,
your iOS device, your phone or your iPad or whatever.
Right.
Which may not be what you want. I'm not sure about that. They may find some way to link it, but I can only imagine that if they're linking it, they are linking it by allowing you to make an account with like The Economist and then linking the Apple payment account with your Economist account. And so that would allow you to log in on a computer and read it, but it would also mean that you are still making another account.
Right.
Although I guess the payment side of things is still separate. So I'm not really sure about how that works. I did try that out once with the English edition of the German newspaper Der Spiegel, which I got a 6-month subscription to through the app. And I don't think I ever read. But it was very easy. It was just like any other in-app purchase.
Right.
And yes, I think there is zero chance I would have tried that by going to the Der Spiegel website and making myself an account and giving them my credit card details and all the rest of it. So,
right.
It has value. It means that whoever is processing this centralized system that everyone uses takes a cut. So it's either increasing the price of your subscription or taking money away from the journalist involved. Maybe that's a trade-off that's worth making. Maybe the extra custom they get from that is worth whatever cut the payment processor takes. That's how credit cards work already, right? It's just you're adding another layer to that.
And the App Store as well, of course.
And the App Store.
App stores.
So, interestingly, there is a movement in apps towards a subscription model rather than a pay once model. So if anything, it feels like things are moving away from the, how you started off this suggestion when you were saying if you could pay $1 for an article or something. It feels like it's almost going the other way, that rather than articles becoming like apps that you pay for individually, apps are becoming more like newspapers that you pay a subscription to get constant updates.
Yeah, that's a really controversial topic in audio production,
right,
at the moment, because a lot of people are really, really unhappy with this tendency at the moment for the large DAW, that's digital audio workstation, manufacturers to be heavily considering the idea of subscription models, because There are also plugin manufacturers who are doing that as well. The elephant in the room there, as probably anybody who's in audio production is thinking right now, if they're listening, is Avid's Pro Tools. Pro Tools is kind of like the, at least it's changing a bit now, but for the past 20, 25 years, it was the sort of default for high-end music studio, and also post-production software. And Pro Tools, controversially, several years ago, I think it is now, switched to a subscription model.
Right.
And that has that caused a huge outcry. And obviously, you've got Adobe doing the same thing as well. And
right.
This idea.
I mean, so Adobe did it quite a while ago now. I think 5, maybe even 7 years ago. It's a long time ago. And there was a huge outcry at the time. I feel like that's died down now, and people have just learned to live with it. I definitely don't hear as much of that anymore. But
I'm because I do sound and I do graphics, and I do vector graphics mostly. So I use Illustrator, but then I need Photoshop, and I also use Lightroom, and then I use Audition as well for audio stuff. I use that a lot. And previously, I was also using InDesign, and for me, Creative Cloud actually represents excellent value, actually, for me. But I know that I'm not the majority, and a lot of people just need Photoshop, or they just need.
They do offer a Photoshop only subscription, though. So I mean, it's a difficult thing. I understand the feeling behind it, that you feel like it used to be you just walk in a shop and buy a boxed piece of software, and then you owned it, or you felt like you owned it,
right?
And you could use it indefinitely, and that was great for the user. But if it turns out to be unsustainable, then I think people making apps have to try out other models, because otherwise they're going to go out of business. And so it is a difficult problem.
There is some.
They're not doing it for fun, right?
Right. There is some. It is worth mentioning at this point. There is one DAW that is trying an interesting model that has also received a lot of praise and a lot of criticism. That is a newer kid on the block from Berlin. They're all from Berlin. But there's a new kid on the block, not so much new anymore, but a company called Bitwig. Bitwig is it's a rather excellent DAW with some fresh new ideas. Came around in the I can't remember how many years ago now, but Bitwig's model is curious. They switched to a subscription model maybe about a year ago, but their subscription model is a bit unusual in that the way that it works is you pay a yearly fee, and that it represents your subscription. However, the difference between Bitwig's model and, say, Creative Cloud is that you can, if you decide that you see the next version of Bitwig has features that you don't really need, and you feel that the current version you're using is adequate for you for the moment, you can actually stop paying your subscription, and you'll still have a perpetual license of the version of the program where you stopped paying. So you kind of own it. If you want constant updates every year and you want access to the new features, then you have to keep paying the subscription. But the idea is that you own the software, and that if you stop paying the subscription, you can continue using it. And if you want to, like, for example, okay, so I've been using it for 11 months, and then suddenly the 12th month comes and the new version comes out, and it doesn't have anything I want in it, so I'm not going to pay this year. However, the next year, for example, if you've used that older version for 2 years, and then suddenly some great new feature comes into Bitwig that you want to use, you can then actually restart the subscription at that point.
Right.
And restart paying every year to do it that way if you like. And
right.
So that was the way that they addressed the situation. And the key criticism that people have been very, very vocal about this is that, well, that's all good and well for Bitwig. However, when operating systems change, things break, and audio apps often tend to have trouble when there are OS updates. And the criticism that's been given to Bitwig is that it's great, it's a nice idea. However, once we update our OS, there's no guarantee that this old version is going to continue to work, which means you're kind of already forcing people to constantly update anyway. So,
That's exactly the reason subscriptions exist in the first place.
Right.
Like, Yeah, of course. It takes work to make it work with the new version of the OS.
Right.
That's why they need you to keep paying,
Right.
because they need you to pay them for their work.
Right.
I mean, so that's how this whole thing came about in the first place. And that would have been the case with boxed software. I mean, if you had an old version of a piece of software and you didn't buy the latest version and the old version was written for an old version of the OS, exactly the same thing would happen, unless they released an update for the old version.
I think the difference there is that there's a feeling that updating your OS is a necessity in this day and age because of security concerns and things like, and stability and things like that.
Sure.
So it's not a choice. So if you consider, then it's not your choice whether or not you're going to update your OS. So for example, okay, I've got this version, let's say 3 of Bitwig, and it's working very nice with my OS version 16 or whatever. And then OS version 17 comes out and, you've got all these fancy features, but you've also got these critical security updates, which are important for the stability and the security and privacy and all that of your system.
Right.
You're kind of locked into upgrading to the operating system 17, and now Bitwig 3 doesn't work anymore. And you kind of would feel in that situation that, well, yeah, okay, it's fair enough that if I want to have Bitwig 4, which works with this operating system 17, I have to start paying for it again. But then I didn't upgrade my OS because I felt like it. It was strongly recommended to me because of these security concerns and fixes and all of that kind of stuff. So
yeah, I mean, I can understand that point of view, but that is not Bitwig's fault, and I feel like they need to get paid for their work. That's why the subscription model has been brought forward as a compromise of like, well, okay, how can we deal with this truth, which is true, that there is more of a necessity to upgrade more frequently now than there used to be, but still be able to support development on the product. One thing that's sort of I don't quite understand about this Bitwig thing is how it's fundamentally different from just buying each new version of the software. I mean, it sounds to me as if it's a subscription that you can stop at any time and choose not to get that year's version of the software, that sounds like, well, you bought the previous year's version of the software and you decide not to buy the next year's, and then you decide to buy the one the year afterwards. The only difference that I can tell is that the default is for it to be bought automatically if it's a subscription, whereas if it's the old, the traditional just buy an upgrade model, then you have to actively choose to go and buy the upgrade. But it's from your description, it sounds like it's basically just formalizing the process of what already happened. Because if you can continue to access it, after you've stopped the subscription, then it's just like buying a piece of software.
I think there's probably an important key piece of information that I'm leaving out of my description of their subscription model, because I don't remember it exactly. And yeah, we can probably put a link in our notes for people to go and actually read if they're interested.
Right.
But that was their, assuming then that this hole in my explanation is filled by something very logical in their policy, that was their way of handling the situation of subscription versus single version purchase,
right,
and owning software, because that's the main thing that people, certainly the way that I feel with regard to Creative Cloud. You mentioned that there is an individual subscription license for Photoshop, but I don't use Photoshop, I use Illustrator. And Illustrator, I believe, doesn't have such a thing.
Right.
And if I cancel my Creative Cloud subscription, it's very, very costly to begin with, because I don't know if you know this, but if you cancel this Creative Cloud subscription, you need to pay half of the remaining months from between when you cancel and when the anniversary of your sign up was.
Sure.
And then after that, you don't actually have access to the software, like you have no license for it. So
right,
all of those Illustrator files sitting on my system and Audition files and, InDesign files, I just can't touch anymore. So
yeah, I mean, you're using all. I think there is an individual Illustrator license. I say this because I got a year's Illustrator license when I wanted to learn Illustrator.
Right.
And I used that for a year, and then I cancelled it when the year was up, so I didn't suffer from this early cancellation fee.
Right.
But yeah. I mean, if you're using,
I'm using all of them, so
Illustrator and InDesign and Audition.
So Creative Cloud does represent very good value for me, even though there is that funny feeling that, well, if I stopped paying Adobe, it's not. I just can't use their software anymore, and
Right.
I mean, I guess in my line of work, not being able to use their software in itself is a problem. So, continuing to pay for it is justified in that sense.
Right.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? Subscriptions.
Yeah. I mean, it's there's two sort of opposite ends of the scale. The middle doesn't seem to be so much affected by this, but the super pro app, Photoshop and DAWs and things like that, seems to be a thing that they're going for in a big way. And it's also being kind of hailed as the savior for the small independent app creator, people who have struggled on the App Store where most apps are just $1 or $2, and it's very hard to create a polished, good quality app for that price. And so the hope is that by having a subscription, which is, $2 or $3 per year, apps will be able to continue to support their app for longer. And we'll see how it goes. I hope it works out. But I do, I personally feel more of a reluctance to sign up for a subscription than to just buy an app on a whim. So it's difficult. It's a difficult problem.
Yeah, I have a feeling that the internet is definitely heading towards some new kind of system, new models, new ideas are going to be coming through pretty soon, I guess, because as we started talking about ad blockers, the rise prevalence of ad blockers is sort of forcing their hand, and we need to find new ways to get revenue and new ways to engage people in our content and make people feel comfortable with paying for it because it costs money to produce.
Right.
It all seems to be coming to a head somehow, and that we're going to be seeing some new ideas coming soon. So that's exciting, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see what happens. I can't quite. Another thing that we haven't mentioned, but it's also interesting to note, is podcasts. We don't have any advertising at the moment, but a lot of podcasts do, and the majority of podcast advertising takes the form of actual readings by the hosts of the podcast.
Oh, right.
That they have made a deal with some company that wants to advertise, and they have a slot where they themselves read some copy and sometimes talk about their own experience with the product or whatever it may be. And it's a very personal thing, and that seems to be working very well for podcasts because listeners feel like they trust the host much more than, it doesn't feel like you're being taken out of the experience so much like with the radio,
right?
And you suddenly hear a jingle and then you hear some advert that you've heard 1,000 times before,
right?
Even if it's an advert for the same thing, you get a lot of the same products and services that advertise on lots of different podcasts, and so you hear these adverts for Audible or Squarespace or whatever it may be,
right,
over and over again, listening to lots of different podcasts. But everyone brings their own personality to that advert, and even the same person from week to week advertising the same service will sort of put a different spin on it each time. And that sort of feels really nice. I hope that is sustainable, because there is a little bit of a, some podcasts are starting to, and some podcast hosts are starting to experiment with injecting ads into podcasts, where you can sort of mark your podcast with places that there's a pause, and they will insert a little radio style, and then play just a recorded advert. And different people downloading the same podcast might get a different advert,
Okay.
And that's much more, and then when you start going down that road, then you start being able to do tracking, because you can see who's getting which adverts, and it all starts to go down a dark road that we've seen before on the web. So I'm kind of hoping that the very personal, intimate nature of the majority of the podcasts that I listen to and the way that adverts work there turns out to be sustainable and something that can continue, because I think that is the most sort of healthy form of advertising that I've encountered, I think. So
everybody, switch to DuckDuckGo. It's good. Highly recommended.
They're not actually paying us. We're supposed to wait until they say they're going to pay us before we start.
Oh, whoops.